Welcome to our conversation on the future of Marine Corps Special Operations. I'm August Cole, managing partner at Useful Fiction and co-author with Peter Singer of Ghost Fleet. Today I'm joining Major General Peter Huntley, commander of Marine Forces Special Operations Command. Major General Huntley brings over 30 years of Marine Corps experience, including multiple combat deployments and key leadership positions within MARSOC. He previously commanded the Marine Raider Regiment, Special Operations Command South. He served as the Chief of Staff for Joint Special Operations Command and Headquarters Marine Corps Director Operations, Divisions, Plans, Policies, and Operations. Today we'll explore MARSOC's evolution, its modernization efforts, and how the Raiders are preparing for future conflicts. It's an honor to join you today, Major General Huntley.
Thanks, August, and welcome to Stones Bay, home of the Marine Raiders. Look forward to the conversation this morning.
You know, that force that you have today, the force that will be in the formations 5 years from now, 5 years beyond that, what kind of continuities are you seeing, or at least planning for, having in there in terms of the characteristics and qualities of a Raider who's, deploying in 2035 versus 2025?
Yeah. Again, I feel pretty good about the younger people that we're bringing into the formation now, whether they're a special operations capabilist or whether they're an operator, and so that doesn't worry me. The people, there's a lot of talk about what's available to the force these days. I'm seeing good people,
yeah.
Right? So again, I think the heaviest lifts on people like me and my team up here in the ivory tower is being able to set the conditions, being able to compete for the resources, so that they have the proper training and they also have the capabilities that are going to make them successful. If we can do that for the force, those staff NCOs, those young NCOs, those junior officers, I am constantly impressed with how they're able to get it put together. We just got to make sure we have the right structure and the right capabilities in place for them. So really, if there's anything that keeps me awake at night or things that I think about constantly, it has to do with our ability to modernize, to keep up with the rapidly and increasingly rapidly evolving operational environment, or what's going to be required in the operational environment. That's the biggest challenge. I think we have a good vision of what's required on the way ahead. I think we're pretty darn well organized on how we're going to do it, but we're still part of a system that doesn't probably work at the speed of what's required. So, because you never know when it's game day, yeah. You never know when it's kickoff. So really what we have to do is we have to move as fast and as well as we can, and be as ready as possible for when the call comes. So, and again, it would be an anomaly in history if that day never came. So we have to assume at some point we're going to be in some form of conflict. It's funny. I tell the guys about I just came out of SOC South, mm-hmm. Right? And we talk here a lot about the PRC. We talk about the Russians. We talk about the Iranians, all the Iranians, surrogates, etc. But really, everywhere you look, even if it's what would be pronounced as a low-level threat, they're getting pretty darn capable at the tactical edge. I'll go back to our time and our experiences as MARSOC against ISIS in northern Iraq. ISIS had a lot of capability. It was very nascent and it was pretty immature, but you could see what they were trying to do. Now, again, I said I just came out of SOC South, and I saw our partners, the Colombian SOF, having to contend with break-off factions of the FARC, but also some of the narco groups, particularly like Clan de Golfo. And that what I noticed was how dang capable they had become. So it's not even a terrorist organization; it's a narco group, Clan de Golfo, and they were using unmanned systems. They were using some pretty modern means for sensing the Colombian military, and they had the ability to reach out and get some form of precision strike at distance. So whoever we end up having to contend with, they're going to be pretty darn capable.
So that proliferation of technology changes, sounds like, the higher end conflict context, but also the irregular warfare, the kind of more classic unconventional warfare missions for the Raiders.
Yes. One of the things we talk about here is, is how do we interface with the joint force? What capabilities do we need to bring online to be a contributing member to that joint force? But also, how do we address the challenges that we're going to see at the tactical edge? All right, because whoever we end up contending with, they're going to be. We have to assume they're going to be pretty darn capable. I think the days of the guy in the mountains in Afghanistan, where he just has maybe an old AK-47. Maybe if they're really capable, they'll have a Dushka or so. But no, now when we see that guy, they're going to have the ability to sense us at some range, and they're going to have the ability to reach out and touch us at some range. So how do we negate that? How do we operate in that environment?
And is that a technological solution? Because you talked about modernization, or is that as much training or even culture?
It's all of it. So I'd like to talk about it's yes and. So it's everything that we've known about warfare since the beginning of time, except things just keep getting layered onto it. So the characteristics of war, the nature of war, there's nothing out there that shows that this is gonna change, right? Just ask some of these guys on the front lines in Ukraine. However, a lot of different technologies, a lot of different capabilities are being layered in, and it seems like it's happening at an increased speed.
Yeah, it does.
So if you just kind of go back to our experiences in Afghanistan, Iraq, then you look at kind of the dust up between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You look at some of the things that Hezbollah, even in Gaza, between the Israelis and the Palestinians in there, and then of course everybody likes to talk about, and this is a great example, is kind of the tactical edge, what's happening there in Ukraine. Still very violent, very brutish, all the descriptors that we're all used to, except now the capabilities they seem to be increasing at an alarming pace. So for us, the challenge is, okay, how do we keep up with that at the operational level, at the tactical edge, and then the training, the doctrine, the organization, all those knock-on effects are significant. So, a element leader or a team leader, whether it's a staff NCO or whether it's a junior officer, their ability to understand all the different capabilities, both friendly and enemy, and be able to contend with that, be able to organize that, and be successful in that environment, it has some significant training challenges.
Yeah, I mean, the role of just learning,
right,
becoming a lot more front of mind. That seems to be, whether it's technological familiarization or competency, or just simply being situationally aware of, what is the latest quadcopter, sensing package that you can buy on the open market. That seems like it's going to be pretty potentially impactful, ongoing.
The good news, one thing I have observed, at least in our formations, is that the younger people that we have coming up through the system now, they're really truly technology natives. So I'm always impressed at how fast they can pick up and understand a variety of issues and how they all interrelate, particularly as we talked about, the technology gets layered in. So that's not one of my primary concerns.
Yeah.
Just seeing our guys in action. Really, what concerns me, as I talked about before, is how do we build the systems in place so that they can be successful, whether it's initial training or whether it's the dedicated workups we do before each deployment.
I mean, some of that will reflect the unique, offering or capabilities that MARSOC brings, and when you define that for a younger Marine who's thinking about trying out to become a Raider or working for the larger component, how do you define that to them? When you basically kind of unpack some of these changes, the history being foundational but layering on technology, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, if you took a good look at our recruiting, assessment, and selection, then as we get into the training part of bringing guys on board, bringing folks on board, it's really everything that you'd imagine it would be like being a raider. It's true. So you're going to have to be physically tough. You're going to have to be physically fit. Moving over distances under load. Not having the proper sleep or the proper food, being cold, wet, etc., and being able to still function. Absolutely. But also too, and they can learn it quickly when they get here. Is you have to have something on the ball, and you have to show the same kind of grit, the same kind of tenacity in the cognitive realm as well. So, it's no secret. What are we looking for? Yes, we're looking for physically tough people, but also we're looking for people that are tough from a spirit perspective. They're resilient, and they have something on the ball cognitively.
Within the larger, SOCOM enterprise, if you want to call it that, the Raiders have, a particular set of capabilities and skills. How do you define that within SOCOM when you're talking to other, commands, other leaders?
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion right now because, during the GWAT, if you will, soft got to a much more fungible place. We're all kind of doing the same thing, and that's kind of where but you can see it now. And our friends over at the Naval Special Warfare, they're moving much more to a maritime environment, and our Special Forces Army partners, they're going back to some of their core capabilities. So we're still a relatively new kid on the block. We're not that new anymore. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary, but we really see ourselves as we've used the term connector in the past, but let me put a little definition to that. I think we have the capabilities, and our systems really produce a force that enables the addressing of key operational problems for the broader joint force. So whether that's supporting theater level maneuver, whether it's supporting theater level fires, or whether it's setting the conditions for joint operations. I think a lot of the capabilities we're bringing online, the maturity of our force, I think that puts us, we're well suited for that. And I think we're doing pretty darn well at that.
With the larger kind of operational priorities of, let's call it the joint force in a large scale conflict, right? What the Army calls LSCO or has called LSCO. There is an information and a data and intelligence component as much as kinetic. What's your kind of take on the roles that Raiders will play in bringing, whether it's information or effects, alongside the traditional kind of raiding missions and things that maybe harken back even to World War II?
Yeah, I kind of chuckle because I'm spending an extraordinary amount of T-80 money on guys being out in the western deserts of this country working with, again, other parts of the joint force on working on how do we communicate, how do we have the information flow, what are those comm pathways that allow people like ourselves who have a persistence inside of what potentially could be contested or denied areas. How do we have what our sensors are, what our partners' sensors are, or what maybe potentially what of our surrogates' sensors are? How do we take that ability to sense, ingest that data, if you will, and push that into the joint force so they can do what they need to do?
The pathways for all that data, now we've got things like Starlink, we've got globalized mobile phone networks, plus we have classic defense networks, right, that are part of the architecture that DoD is building. Is that something that's a paradigm going forward in the future where commercial networks and moving data and things like that are going to be really operational important for soft forces?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That's a great question. I think right now that the role that commercial will play in terms of facilitating comm pathways, I think that's an open-ended question right now. As everybody knows, the Joint Fires Network is still somewhat conceptual. It's starting to take shape, and it seems like it's progressing quicker and quicker, but I think it would be early to say exactly how that information is going to flow. One of the biggest things, though, is going to be the security of those comm pathways, and so it'll be an interesting question on how purely commercial can play in that.
Yeah, it's almost the idea of the value of data in the moment, versus data in a system that's protected. That is it, have an expiration, and that it's better to share it quickly and broadly
Right.
versus kind of holding it and then dribbling it out when it's possible, which in the Indo-Pacific might be hard.
Yeah, or and again, we have to assume that, and I think it's a reasonable assumption that any opponent's going to be somewhat capable, all right? But we pace against the higher end opponents, right? So the other thing too is from a soft perspective, if our value proposition is our persistence inside of these contested areas, our ability to communicate from that situation out, it's what you're emitting as well.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that's one of the reasons I think there's a lot of question marks around the role of commercial networks. And if we do have, if we are reliant or purely commercial comm systems are in play, we're going to have to address the security of it, because if you can be sensed,
Right.
You can be killed.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting you talked about history as foundational and layering on these elements like the technology we're talking about now. When you read history, when you look back at particularly World War II and the Pacific Campaign, the foundational era of the kind of raiders and amphibious war fighting for the U.S., what lessons are you drawing from that era to 2025 and maybe even out to 2035?
Yeah, that's a good one. First of all, we do have a great history with the raiders of World War II, but I'll just be honest with you, it's not really relevant right now in terms of the role they played, the skill that they played. The best series of books that I've written, and I recommend these to anybody, is Ian Toll's Pacific Trilogy, if you're familiar with it. Because you really get a feel for what the scale of a great power conflict looks like in the Pacific. Yeah. And even though that was in the early part of the 40s, I think a lot of the considerations are the same. So particularly as you kind of look at our current situation, and you look at the dynamics in the first island chain, the second island chain, even south of there, you can't help but really gets your mind working, and you kind of get a good feel for what it looks like for somebody that's to the west to be able to push out and someone from the east to push in. And then the list of potential tasks or things to think about that comes out of that is mind-boggling. It really wakes you up. And anybody that has an interest in national security, what's relevant today, if you haven't read those books, you're behind. You really need to read them.
It's on your commander's reading list, I assume.
Yeah, they're pretty darn thick books.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're cheap either on Amazon, but I encourage people to read them. So I've actually convinced a bunch of folks to at least do books on tape during the commutes in and out. But and it's really good because it shows about what it looks like, what the U.S. looked like at the beginning, what our struggles were, how they overcame the struggles.
In terms of transformation of the force.
Yeah. And it's very readable. And Ian Toll really gets into the layering the tactical to the higher level considerations. And then it kind of takes you through the whole evolution, both the increase in the Allied capabilities and what caused the decreases in the enemy's capabilities. Fascinating reading. But back to your point, it's the same place.
Yeah.
The speed, a lot of the considerations will change, but still not a dissimilar problem set. So, anyways, I don't mean to go off on a big plug for Ian Toll, but those kind of books I find the naval campaigns, the Army campaigns with MacArthur, how he came up from Australia, and all those considerations. There's a ton of good books out there on that, but you really need to be digging into that and how it was done last time and kind of what worked, what didn't work, what the considerations were. It's very relevant today.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the futures work that I do when we're writing fiction, one of our first stops we'll take is looking at historical accounts of something that's a like battle or a similar geography, because it's like that Mark Twain quote. I think it's his that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's actually a lot of people who don't spend enough time just to make a plug for history, right? That you need to get embedded into some of those things that happened in the past because they are not going to repeat linearly. But boy, there are a lot of echoes.
Yeah. And the kind of work that you guys do with Pete Singer, et cetera, that's also just as relevant. That's very relevant because you really have to, you have to be rooted in the history. You have to know where you are in your capability developments, but you really have to have I guess I'll say imagination for the future. And that's imagination for how's it all going to go down?
Yeah.
You really need to be thinking about that. And again, with the deep, with a little bit of depth on your history, a good understanding of where you are now, and you really need to, and it can go 1,000 different ways, but you have to have a concept envisioned on how this is all going down in order to tie back, to keep you on track as you're going through your capability developments. So
yeah, I think
the partnership with, and I'm not doing plugs for you, but the partnership with yourself and Pete Singer, that's been very helpful for us. And I'll just give you a great example. It's, you kind of go through, and I'm going to drag you down into resourcing here, but you kind of go down through your campaign of palm submissions, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a game plan, right? But it has to start somewhere. There has to be an aim point out there, a North Star. So, on the other side of it, being able to imagine, if you will, the future is as critical as anything else.
Yeah, I think being able to identify the world you want to see and work back from there, like how do you get there from a foresight, and just kind of, as you said, whether you're building a POM or a strategy, can be really, really helpful, because then you can have a conversation where everybody doesn't always have to agree even about that vision, but at least you're talking.
And it's good to have, it's good to reach out to the academic world, because it's very easy. There's a pitfall here. It's very easy to get caught up in your own narrative, right? Your own, how you want things to go down, because you're working 12, 14 hours a day, probably more, and then if you're inside yourself here, you could really just pull yourself right into how you want things to go, and then that your North Star becomes kind of not as well as informed as it needs to be. So I would encourage anybody to leverage our academic partners. There's a bunch of them out there, and get some outside help in trying to envision the future. Don't get sucked into just exactly what we're talking about right now. I
have to think about it like checking blind spots.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're field of vision, there's certain things you just can't see, and being aware of what's lurking right there, and just knowing every once in a while that you may need other people to help kind of check those, and not just the blind spots of the present, but going forward. The corollary of that is like the adversary point of view too. Trying to kind of think like the red team, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do you kind of incorporate that? If you're looking at whether it's Indo-Pacific or your SOC South experience, clearly you have a lot of experience with different types of threats, different types of groups, regular and state actors.
I think it goes back to what we've all learned through our education. You really have to do a kind of a red teaming of things, and from a reasonable position. It's like what's their why? What is in this for them, right? So at SOC South, we really took a hard look at why were the PRC so active in these locations. It was easy to find out. It's pretty simple. One, it's resource. They need food off that South American continent. And around Panama, it's very active there. Yeah. Why? Well, 70% of the world's trade. And of that food, which accounts to about 50% of their food coming off South America or from the U.S. Midwest, goes through that canal. So, so that's why it's important. So now you can kind of understand kind of what is it for them. So if you look at it from a Western Pacific perspective, it's like, hey, what are their considerations? If it is Taiwan, are they going to just go straight up the middle? Are they going to worry about their flanks? What's their considerations? They got probably the world's greatest military, the world's greatest navy sitting right outside of that. They probably need to create space. What does that mean? These sea lines of communication, they probably either have to secure them or get through them to get their mass into space. Obviously that informs how we look at the world. So the capabilities, our positioning, all that kind of thing has a little bit of context to it.
Yeah, I think thinking about that globalized dimension, it's often that a lot of you talked about kind of the silos that people can get in, thinking about one's problem specifically. It could be a certain part of the East or South China Sea, but recognizing, especially from like a SOCOM perspective, that there's this globalized, I don't know if the word's attack surface, but there's a globalized context for the strategic imperatives that like China has. The more it expands globally, the more exposed it is. Yeah. Right. And I think that is part of some of the shifts we're seeing, operationally. Yeah,
it's an interesting subject, but pray to God we never see conflict on this front, and it just becomes a competition. in the economic space, that'd be fine, I think, from both sides of the equations. But you know, that's not what these guys in these funny suits get paid to think about. So we have to be able to in a position to have options for our national leadership, and if it does happen, let's hope it's as small as possible.
Yeah.
But we got to be prepared for the war. So there's regional considerations and there's global considerations.
You know, the incorporation and integration of the Raider force within the larger Marine Corps. Talk a bit about your thinking on that right now, and you know how that's progressing and changing, you know, as we speak.
Yeah, this is definitely something we're working very hard on to, you know, during the war on terror, particularly in Afghanistan, we didn't really have much interface with the broader Marine Corps during the ISIS fight, but we operated in some of the same areas, but we really didn't work that closely together, and there really wasn't a compelling need to. There was some cooperation, but it wasn't significant. But the world's changing, right? So the things we're talking about against any of the major competitors, this is really about big joint war fighting, right? So as you look towards the Western Pacific, I'll just be flat out honest with you. I think the Marine Corps and what started with General Berger is about as right as it can be, all right? It's not perfect, but it's as right as it can be. And the Marine Corps is on that path, you know, what's in the past been called force design, you know, but as they kind of work through the Marine Corps' force development, that's about as what is right. They also have, you know, from a broad joint force perspective, they're our natural partner. Not just because we're all Marines, it's just because where we're positioned, what we're being asked to do, where they're positioned, what they're being asked to do, the kind of capabilities that they're developing, the kind of capabilities that we're going to need to develop is much more aligned. And it's a natural partnership, of course. So it kind of goes back to our basic view of the world. We're in a big joint war fighting world, and our role as SOF is to solve key operational problems. And just a casual look at where we're both operating right now, there is a lot of work to do between us and the broader Marine Corps.
And you know, this is kind of a modernization and maybe even training question. Do you see a lot of more crossover between whether it's equipment, whether it's some of the training, you know, that you're doing with the littoral regiments from the Marines, or you know, other parts of the Marine Corps, as being more of a priority, or is that going to need to be necessarily separate?
So I'll come off a little parochial here, but I've heard people in Army uniform say this, so some senior to me. The problem in the Western Pacific, to a very large degree, is going to be SOF, Marines, and subs. In terms of being able to perform, I'll use General Berger's language, the stand-in force tasks that are going to be required. So, you know, it's easy for me to talk about the Marine, our relationship with MAR-4 PAC, 1 MEF or 3 MEF, but the same thing applies to Army or Navy. And you know, my partner over in Naval Special Warfare, Admiral Sands, he's very closely working with the fleets.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's probably the natural thing to do is for the individual soft components to increase and accelerate their operational relationships with their home service.
And is that, you know, something that rests on personal relationships? Is it much, you know, more kind of programmatic than that? I mean, what is the right kind of design approach, do you think, to creating that integration?
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I worry about is that some of us older guys, you know, we grew up in the broader Marine Corps, so I have those relationships. We go to schools together. We need to reinvigorate that. Because you know, it's easy for SOF, particularly over the last 20 years, to become more insular. But we need to go to command and staff. We need to go to expeditionary warfare school. Same thing, you know, applies for the Navy. Same thing applies for the Army. We need to be integrated with the joint force. Vice just being inside of our own cocoon, because it's going to take. Obviously, it's going to take all the joint force, ourselves included, and the teamwork. It's hard to build those relationships on day one, right? So those have to be built over the years.
You know, it would seem to me too that difficulty in dealing with logistical challenges in the Pacific. Just there's so much blue, right? You got to cross a lot of water. There's not a lot of safe, havens. That a lot of the work the Marine Corps at large has been doing the last decade, right, on contested logistics is probably, among the most leading edge out there.
Yeah.
How do you interface and kind of view that? Because that seems like it's very aligned with a lot of those soft challenges that the Raiders are working on too.
Yeah, that is a wicked problem, and I don't think it's solved yet. There's a lot of hard work being done on it, but we're particularly with 3MEF watching some of the things that they're doing. I think there's still a lot of questions around anything outside how it's going to be projected in, and particularly at scale. But I'll tell you one thing that we're working on that I think could negate a lot of these problems is that our ability to leverage, to be able to illuminate the operating environment and to be able to leverage any magazine or any shooting mechanism, will allow us to leverage the goodness that our coalition partners have, whether they be Five Eye or whether they be something other than Five Eye or whether they be host nation or whether they be surrogate. And then again, whether you're soft or whether you're conventional forces, there's going to have to be a higher degree of disaggregation at a lower level.
Being physically apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's probably a lot of work that still needs to be done on how are you going to live, thrive, and survive without an Iron Mountain, a few kilometers away. That goes for not only all classes of supply, food, ammo, fuel, etc., maintenance. You're just not going to be able to project large-scale amounts in there. So small, disaggregated, able to leverage other people's stuff, whether it's supply, munitions, fuel, etc.
Is a lot of that, going to come down to being prepared ahead of time? Basically, a lot of the allied kind of concepts are about how do we get as much material close to the potential fight. But then you see also pretty innovative ideas with autonomous resupply, whether it's by air, by sea particularly. Are those going to factor into the future, you think?
I think this is one of the things that SOF really brings to the table, right? Is that a lot of these areas we're persistent in there, we're living in there on 24/7, 365, and to be able to put those preparatory things in place, I think that's one of the things that SOF brings a unique capability to. And a lot of it too is just off the relationships. Our relationship with our Filipino partners at the JTF level, all through the Philippine archipelago. Yeah. Same thing could be said in other areas as well. That sets the conditions for, frankly, non-standard ways to support the force. Whether it's understanding what the local economy can provide, whether it's understanding what can be brought into what location, at what speed, then you can really start getting into the nitty-gritty. Mm-hmm. What are the capacity at airfields, what are the capacity at ports, what areas are safe, what areas are not safe, etc.
The aspect of that problem being solved by a mix of, again, relationships, technology, its investment today, but ultimately it culminates on kind of cracking that really wicked problem that you said, where there's going to be a lot of contested sea lines of communication and things like that. Do you think people have gotten their heads around that enough yet, or is that something you feel like you have to kind of drive home still in conversations about this operating environment?
No, I think senior leaders that I talk to, my peers, I think everybody has a clear understanding that one of the primary challenges is to be able to project force in either immediately prior to conflict or post initiation of conflict. And again, that's where, again, SOF brings a lot to the table. The Marine Corps is doing some pretty good stuff here as well, is you have to be persistent inside. Because again, it's going to be hard to get stuff from the outside in. At least that's what you have to make that assumption.
Mm-hmm. And so that force that's in close, you've talked about kind of closing this kill web concept, right, of bringing to bear effects of different kinds from allies, from the U.S. Can you unpack that a little more and what that looks like, just to kind of describe that vision of that kill web?
Really, it comes down to being able to, I'll just give you the bumper sticker here, is to leverage any sensor to facilitate any shooter, right? Because what you got to remember is we're talking about scale, and your opponent's scale is on their home turf. So their ability to sustain, to regenerate, to sortie against you is far greater. And we're probably going to be talking about a significant scale here. So there's no way, no how that we're going to be able to put enough unilateral sensors or shooters, just the magazine problem set, into where they need to be, right? So what you have to do is you have to build this array of sensing capabilities. That's going to take a village, as they say. Whether it's a host nation partner, whether it's a Five Eye partner, whether it's some other part of the coalition, or from a soft perspective, whether it's a variety of surrogates that you've built over time. So the idea is to be able to see the operating environment, to be able to pull data that gives you a target quality at scale. And then the real trick is to be able to aggregate that data and then push it into the Joint Fires network. I think that's one of the things that we're doing very well here. We're working very hard on it. We're going through a series of exercises right now. It's starting to become increasingly a mature capability. And hopefully we look to be bringing that in as a no-kidding program of record within a year. Again, persistence inside, the ability to sense, make sense, and then facilitate joint fires and maneuver. I think that's where Marine Raiders are really bringing something to the table.
In many ways, it seems like a response to this increasing focus on so to speak, the fight tonight. Having been looking at future stuff for a few years, I would say 5 years ago, people were talking 2040 and really focusing on that.
Yeah.
And I would say in the last 18 months to 2 years, generally within the U.S. and the allies, very, very like the 2027 window for, again, Taiwan, et cetera. What's that shift like, trying to manage both the present focus, what do you bring to the fight today, right? But also knowing that the force is transforming, the world is changing quickly.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of tension to adjudicate there, where one can inform the other, but they're sometimes different.
Well, as I said before, one of the things that I think about at night is, when you really think about it, like I said before, right? The skills, the capabilities, the way we train right now are very relevant. But what we know is that the operating environment is changing from all these different levels that we've been talking about. So really, the thing to worry about is how fast can you adapt? How fast can you rapidly iterate through your various deployments and operations, and how fast can you layer in these new capabilities, to say nothing of your .mil PF, your doctrine, your training, your organization, how I run the schoolhouse, how we select people, how we build up for each deployment. How fast can you adapt there? That's the spot right there. Yeah. The force development and the capability development. How quickly and how well can you move there? And that's the challenge. I think we have a pretty good vision of where we're at now, where the operating environment is. I think we see where the ball's going in the operating environment. I feel confident we know what our to-do list is on force development, capability development. And then the thing that kind of makes you breathe into a paper bag is how well and how fast can I move? Because it goes back to my point before. You don't know when the bell's going. Yeah. Right? So you got to be as ready as possible. With that, I do breathe into a paper bag about that, but we're doing pretty damn well over here at MARSOC, and we intend to keep moving at pace.
In many ways, you're talking about the pathways that information goes from the field back to the headquarters here and back out again. How are you kind of managing that information flow, like that OODA, John Boyd OODA loop cycle almost in a way, right?
The feedback loop.
Yeah.
That's interesting because in one way we're blessed with our current mission sets that we've been given, because we're getting a lot of sets and reps in, whether it be in the Mideast, in Eastern Africa, or probably our biggest contribution out right now is inside the first island chain. So we're getting a lot of constructive reps and sets in. In Iraq still, we're getting real reps and sets in. So obviously before we send people out, we have a big production here. We bring everybody to the table. We talk about how we trained, what went right, what went wrong. Do we think we're on track? Do we not think we're on track? And that training cycle that these units had just gone through was informed by the people that had just come off, right? And again, yesterday I should have had you in here. We had one of these big seances. Over the last couple of days, actually, we've been doing them, so that we're capturing all the things that went well. Was the training adequate? Was the equipping adequate? What are your shortfalls? Where do you think it's going? What's going to be needed next for the next team going out? So, and then we kind of have that feedback loop that informs not only our training and the folks that are building up for the next deployment, but also the people in our combat development and integration team. So as we're building the concepts, as we're building, whether it's a tactical capability or whether we're building something that's going to be relevant in a larger joint fight, that we're getting that constant refinement of our efforts.
And does that flow to the individual training course and at that level too? Or
it's across all fronts. So, and these are tough conversations we have, and they always go long. But they, like I like to say, we have gritty. We have an environment here where we have gritty conversation, right? And it's good. It's a healthy thing. But it's whether we're talking about. I'll use a great example. This is the hot conversation right now. Is how are we spending our available time in the entry pipeline for officers? Because what we do know, and this is kind of how the conversation goes, the requirement for them to organize and coordinate so many different functions and systems is increasing at a rapid rate. How are we getting them the initial sets and reps so they are trained on not how to do that, because it's going to keep changing, but how to organize for that? So those type of things. It's like, hey, how are we spending our time training the operators? Okay, are we spending 8 weeks in a CQB house? Is that the right answer? Or do we need to have some kind of different combination? Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, we're pretty hard on ourselves, to be honest with you. And like I said, these are gritty conversations, but the good news is we have those gritty conversations in order to refine whether it's our entry pipeline, our PTPs, or our combat development and integration. Which is another thing I'd like to hit on. One of the things that one of the previous commanders here, a decision they made a while back, which is paying huge dividends in this environment that we're talking about, is how we're organized as a component on that front. So where we don't have a J8, you will not be able to find the J8 here, and you'll not be able to find the J5. We have one team. So our future planning team and our PALM resourcing team, they're one team, okay? And we refer to them as combat development integration. And to be honest with you, we tore a page from how the Marine Corps does business, which seems to be pretty effective, and we're seeing it pay pretty good dividends here at a much smaller scale.
You know, the Marine who's looking at joining the Raiders is thinking about the training courses and thinking about them in maybe a past context. What are some of the changes that they might be seeing, you know, as they select, assess, you know, go through to become a Raider versus, you know, say a decade ago or 5 years ago?
You know, it goes back to, you know, you're still going to do all the stuff you would imagine, you know, from the books or from the movies. It's all that and then some. But also don't be surprised by the cognitive challenges that you're going to see. So your ability to have to think, act independently, to be independent, or to operate as part of a very small team, disaggregated from a larger force, out on the cutting edge, you'll be surprised of how much of that you're going to see, because that's what we demand of our guys, and that's why our training continuum, our selection is it's not easy, but I'd like to say, if you want to be the epitome of a Marine, everything that you imagine a Marine to be, this is the place to be. I really do think that if you went back to some of the greatest Marines in our history, and you brought them here to MARSOC, they would recognize these guys.
The kind of historic continuities too to that evolution and training, almost back to the future with World War II and the Office of Strategic Services, working with local populations and ones and twos, having a high cognitive and sometimes even academic background to be operationally effective. Do you see continuities, back to, World War II, genesis of special operations, or do you feel like this is its own thing that we're in now?
No, there's definitely a tie back to that. Whether it's Wild Bill Donovan in the OSS. There was a great Marine in that group, by the way, Peter Ortiz. In fact, there's an award from the OSS Society named after him.
Sterling Hayden, too, the Hollywood actor, also a Marine who was in the OSS.
Yep, that's right. So I just want to get a shout out for the Marines there. But I was having a debate with General Fitton yesterday about Army history. But also too the grit that we commonly associate with the Marine Corps. And then I'll tell you, a lot of people will talk as well about the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps has always been very innovative. Whether it's the vertical assault, the amphibious operations, or frankly the stuff that we're doing now that started with Commandant Berger is continuing with Commandant Smith. I think the Marine Corps is doing I have a pretty good feel for what's going on in the Joint Force, and the innovation there, the thoughts behind it, the attitude, the culture behind that. We definitely benefit from that. It's kind of the Marine Corps being a significant part of our DNA. So, and frankly, I could think about the Marine Corps like us, and when you look at the Joint Force, much smaller part. So really you can't deal with the big idea as much. You have to put points on the board. You have to bring capabilities to reality. So we're very much aligned with our home service in that regard. So it's, yeah.
To that point, I think, and reflects in some of the futures work that I've seen written by raters, that I've seen in just the conversations about operating concepts that are, present and coming, that there's a lot of willingness to reconsider priors, which, isn't always present in conversations about future, operating concepts or the force. Sounds like you're saying that's a cultural element to the Raider community and the Marine Corps at large.
Yeah, it goes back to what we're talking about. There's this natural understanding of our history. I think there's a culture of being able to weed out those things that we did well and those things we didn't well. I'm talking for both for my slice of the Marine Corps, but also the broader Marine Corps. There's the mission imperative now, but there's also that imagination for what the future is going to require. I think that's a pretty powerful combination when it's turned into action, and everything that we've talked about so far this morning. So, so maybe what I talked about before, maybe that's not strictly a MARSOC thing. It's probably something that's inherent in us, as part of us being Marines.
And in that futures vision, or kind of what you're looking at the operating environment from today to say 5 years out, 2030 to 2035. You've talked about the layering on of technologies to the past and foundational trends that we're seeing, but velocity is a constant. It feels like in that conversation. And how do you kind of process and use that to your advantage? Right, things are moving fast. Is there a way to leverage that or arbitrage that almost?
Yeah, we're pretty small. We can move pretty fast, relatively speaking. But it's no secret. I think everybody will say this. I think there's some things that can be done with the way we do business, the way we modernize, because technology is moving much faster than our acquisition systems.
Yeah, it's hard to buy software. It's hard to buy.
It's all that stuff.
Like that.
It is. You really got to take a patience pill, and it's like. It's kind of like when you're on movement on a patrol in thick vegetation. You get what we call these wait a minute finds, and you could easily freak out after a while. You really got to put your patience hat on and just kind of get into a zen and work through all the snags and all the setbacks and all that stuff like that. Anybody's talking about acquisition and innovation, I'm a fan of it. So I don't think right now our systems allow us to move as fast as the evolving operating environments at all levels, tactical through operational, et cetera, as fast as they're moving. There's a lot of great people throughout the DoD that are fighting through it. We're doing pretty well, but we can always do better.
I mean, the Marine Corps itself making pretty significant changes as part of its, the larger force design process, but how they equip a line infantry Marine, whether it's new rifles and suppressors or different kit that they're wearing and equipped with. Do you see that is something that there is going to be that back and forth between using technology and MARSOC, bringing it to the fleet, Marine, and back?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that. In fact, I want to get to a greater degree of that.
Raiders as a battle lab of sorts, or
well, not necessarily a battle lab, but frankly, hey, if we have something that's working, right? Let's let that inform what they're doing, and frankly, vice versa. There's things that they're doing. The Marine Corps is moving pretty fast, right? And when you talk about modernization, those big services have bigger budgets and they have the infrastructure to do things pretty quick when they want to. So there's a lot we can learn from them as well. Particularly as somebody that's going to be we see ourselves interfacing with the Joint Force to a far greater degree in all the roles that we've talked about. There's a lot we can learn from them. So there needs to be a back and forth. I want to say it's not just us dumping onto them. I think it's a two-way street. So in fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm actually a member of the Marine Corps Ground Board, where all the division commanders get together with basically the G3 of the Marine Corps, and they work through these type of issues. So I look forward to that in the coming weeks. I have great relationships with the MEF commanders and the division commanders. We've had a couple of them through here with some deep dives. So what we're looking for is to increase that relationship in order to get that back and forth to a far greater degree.
Is there anything at the top of your shopping list, so to speak, that you would love to port over from the larger Marine Corps, or vice versa, something you'd love to bestow, so to speak, on them?
Yeah, one thing that I tell people is that when you talk about modernization and you talk about Jordan, the services are built for this. All right, SOCOM's moving in this direction, and we're getting increasingly good at this. But the services are moving pretty quick, and they've done a great job. So it goes back to what I said with our home service, the Marine Corps. When you look at the Marine Corps, and you really kind of crack open the books, and you look at what's real and what's conceptual. When I say real, that means something inside of the fight up. All right, something that's either being fielded now or the money's put against the fielding. I am constantly blown away by the capabilities they're bringing on. Now, some of those capabilities we can use. Some of them we could use and be helpful if we could kind of form factor them to it for soft purposes. So, and we're doing some of that, but there's a lot more that we got to do on that front. So, again, I talk about tying into the Joint Force, our natural partner there is our Marine Corps. And the good news is our Marine Corps is moving. I'm constantly surprised by how fast they've moved on some capabilities. So absolutely want to partner with them further on that. I think it's good for them. I think there's things we can do for them in the operational space. And I think there's some goodness that the Marine Corps is bringing to bear through all this experimentation, everything you've seen written and talked about in the Marine Corps. There's a realness there. And from a soft perspective, I would like to leverage that, whether it's straight out of the box or taking it and form factoring it into something that is soft unique. Is it there in areas like communications or more, tactical equipment? Like what sort of things are in there? Yeah, it's really the ability, some of these terminologies I'm using here will sound very familiar. If you roll back the tape on General Smith or General Berger, these aren't my key lines, but the ability to sense and make sense, the ability to facilitate joint fires and maneuver. A lot of these come off the stand-in force. From my perspective, I think there's things that we can do left of conflict that will, one, prepare for conflict, but probably more importantly have a deterrent effect. But if we do go to conflict, there's things that we will have to do to facilitate the Marine Corps' concept of a stand-in force. And again, just because I'm a Marine, I say Marine Corps, but this is a big joint fight, so this applies to whether it's user pack or if it's the fleet, etc. So, but the Marine Corps does some pretty good stuff there. Pretty damn impressive. They're moving out with a purpose. So yes, we are taking a page from their book. There's capabilities that the Marine Corps is bringing online that are real, they're either here or they're on their way. They're coming here very shortly. And again, I think there's some goodness that we can get off of that.
So that sounds like
And
that's
also
sort of,
too,
yeah.
sorry, it goes back because there's also too the stuff that's not nearly as sexy as exciting, but it goes back to what I talk about. All the original tasks and war fighting, hey, they're still there. So we get a lot out of the Marine Corps with our relationships with things like just the School of Infantry across the way over here. So in terms of being much more proficient in our use of machine guns, our use of mortars, our use of rockets, we leverage them incredibly. And then of course we have Marines coming through some of our schools as they kind of get into some more high-end stuff. So there's a good relationship there. So we get a lot out of the Marine Corps, and hopefully we're able to provide something back to the broader Marine Corps as well.
Sounds like that starts to build those relationships at a personal level too, which will probably pay dividends down the road.
Right.
The framing that I was thinking about was this kind of set the theater concept you've talked about before, being able to help, whether it's the Marine Corps, the Army, an ally, as they're responding to almost any kind of operation contingency in the Indo-Pacific. Talk a little bit more about that, because it ties into this deterrence that you've been talking about, the ability to kind of dissuade an adversary from taking the step that you really don't want them to take.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of its positioning, right? So, I'm a wrestler by background, so I like to talk about you don't just dive in on someone's leg, right? You set position, right? So if you're positioning properly, one, God forbid you go to conflict, you're in a better position than your opposition. But in this scenario, it's what's a better deterrent effect? If you have advantageous positions, it probably makes the opponent think about, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe not today. Maybe I need to keep working on this. Maybe this is something I can consider in the future. But right now, I don't have the inside track. My elbows aren't inside. My head position's not right. My stance isn't right. So there's lots of things that can provide deterrent effects. But I think at the tactical level, at the operational level, our positioning and our preparedness will have an outsized effect.
That relationship with the Marine Corps and the back and forth of information, of process, of relationships, there's an allied component to that too. In your career, you've worked in joint roles, obviously different parts of the world. When you look at allied SOF right now, are there lessons learned or people that you're getting, a lot of benefit from, having those kind of exchanges?
Yeah. I've been lucky enough, as an 05 operational commander, as a SOTF commander in Afghanistan, and then as an 06 commander in northern Iraq, I had great exposure to a variety of partners, everything from our NATO partners to host country. So particularly with it's with all of our SOF partners, I'm constantly surprised by the capabilities they have. Some of them exceed our own. But there's always a piece, regardless of who it is, there's always a piece of something they're bringing to the pie that is like, I wish I had that, or that's a better system than I had. The trick is you got to understand their permissions and authorities, because they're working off of national caveats. So it's easy to, I'm not going to name names, but there's one SOF partner we had in Afghanistan. I walked away from Afghanistan completely unimpressed by them. What I didn't appreciate at that young age was that, hey, they're pretty damn good. They just didn't have the national caveats to do it. So I see the same people, literally the same people, in Iraq a few years later, and I'm absolutely blown away by what they're doing. It's just because they had different national caveats. Yeah. So I think I can say this pretty clearly. Whether it's in the Philippines, whether it's in the Mideast, whether it's with a NATO partner, whether it's in my recent experiences in Central and South America, I have never been disappointed. In fact, I've always been impressed by our SOF partners, whether NATO, Five Eyes, or otherwise, right? There's always been something that we can learn from them, and there's always been something they're bringing to the table that you kind of have an aha moment when you see it.
In covering a lot of the geography, like we've talked about, the kind of globalized, challenge of competition, if you look at it from a national strategy perspective, it would seem that those kinds of partnerships are going to be more and more important in the future, just because there's so much, to basically try to get your arms around.
Oh yeah, that's a given. Long ago, I learned that it's highly unlikely that we're ever doing anything without partners. I mean, it's probably going to be multiple partners. So understanding joint and coalition warfare is as important as anything else.
In Indo-PACOM, where you have these challenges again of logistics, a lot of the soft partners, there's also those ongoing relationships over time for missions that are not large, scale combat type missions. Their CT traditionally lasts 20 years or so. But it sounds like that's foundational nonetheless to getting into this kind of new phase that we're in.
Yeah, there's a base that we're learning from. So a lot of the things that SOF did and the conflicts that I've mentioned, or even the competition efforts globally, there's a natural connection to where we're trying to go. So it's not like it's a complete shutdown CT, go to great power competition. There's absolutely a connecting file, whether it's on the intelligence side, whether it's on the operational side, whether it's on the fire side. It's more of an evolution from where we've been, vice a fresh start, which is very helpful, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose having that, it lets you kind of reset in some cases and also like accelerate in others, being able to kind of say, oh, we've always wanted to look at X and we can now do that together.
Yeah.
The dimensions of, a radar operation can seem to, expand and contract depending on the need. But it's not just, people who have been, badged as raiders, but also you have your enablers and people in the larger kind of force capability.
Yeah.
Talk about that growth and that expansion, because whether it's language or cyber, it seems like there's a lot more capability that needs to be brought to bear.
Yeah, one thing I haven't talked about is one of what I consider one of our superpowers, and that is the way, I don't like to use the term enablers because they're too integrated into our force, but for the sake of argument, I'll use the term enabler. But the way we recruit, the way we develop, and the way we integrate our enabling capabilities, whether it's all forms of intelligence, whether it's fires, whether it's logistics, or whether it's the military working dogs. All these people have a designation that we refer to as SOCs, and really Special Operations Capability Specialist. So, we just don't take folks from the broader Marine Corps and bring them in here and we meet on game day at the airhead and we go deploy together. So the way we do it is we bring them on board. They go through basically a soft fundamentals course. We make sure that they're fit, we make sure that they're smart, and make sure that they have the aptitude to get through the training course that we're going to put them through, depending on what their specialty is. So everybody goes through that, and then they go through whether it's our intel course, whether it's our comms course, whether it's our fires course, whether it's our unmanned systems course. Then where we come in, we really have they may not be a soft operator, but they are a soft service member, right? So they are recruited, they're assessed, they're selected, and then most importantly for that crew is the training. Because what comes out of that training is ability for us to fuse everything at the tactical edge, so that when you have this small disaggregated team or split team or group of two or one person out there, that they're able to have these outsized effects. You can't do that if you're meeting at the airhead and the first time you got to know somebody was on deployment, and it's somebody who may or may not be have the skills, have the systems, understand how to work the systems to be able to do these things at the edge.
It seems too that a lot of the, I guess for lack of a better phrase, the over the horizon capabilities that exist within that SOX community, cyber information, seem really, really critical.
That's a prerequisite. For being able to do all the stuff that we like to talk about, and that's the difference between the imagining the future and executing towards the future. It's things like that. It's the stuff that I've talked about with the raiders, being able to get the right people, get them trained properly, and then for these special operations capabilities, having real soft service members that you have for an extended period of time, which we do, so that they can have all those skills, they can understand the systems, and they can operate on the edge with the operators that is a prerequisite to doing everything that we talk about in the glossies.
And that SOX community is assessed, selected, comes in, spends time with the Raider force. Do you see them staying for their careers, or do they go back out into the fleet to bring some of that goodness into the other formations?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. This is a great example of I think we do well for the Marine Corps here. And so a Marine comes here, they're either a second-term Marine, they've already re-enlisted, or they're prior to the re-enlistment. And I say that because we have a very high re-enlistment rate here. So they come through, they go through the assessment and selection. They go through, which is really probably some of our toughest training out there, are these courses that, like, the toughest thing to produce is a MARSOC Intel Marine.
Yeah.
Because what it takes to learn every form of intel and be able to fuse it as a sergeant at the tactical edge, and all the subtasks associated with that is a lot. But anyways, so then we produce them. Then the agreement we have with the Marine Corps is we keep them for 5 years. So they stay here for 5 years as a special operations capability specialist. Okay, they get a couple sets and reps in terms of deployment, so they're pretty darn experienced when they're leaving. They're also a little bit more senior. They're probably moving into they are moving into the staff NCO ranks at that point. What happens then they go back to the fleet, right? So, for instance, if you go out to one of our mess right now, right, and you see some of the cutting edge stuff that they're doing in their, what they call the MIG.
Oh, yeah.
Basically the intelligence brigade, if you will, to use Army language. I don't like to use Army language, but there you got it. The core of what they're doing is being done by former SOCs. So the good news is when they do this, when they come through here, they get a secondary MOS of 8071. So the idea is when we bring back in our staff NCO leadership, usually it's somebody that's come from the 8071. So they come from the fleet, we get them, we enhance their training, we get them some really good operational experience, they go back into the fleet, and then our senior staff NCO leadership are coming from the fleet back into here, which, oh, by the way, they bring a ton of stuff back into us. So it's a pretty healthy cycle, I think. And again, I think this is one of our unique capabilities. I don't think anybody else out there is doing business like this. And you can kind of proof in the pudding, kind of see us over the years, some of the stuff that we've gotten kudos for from within the SOF community. A lot of that is leveraged off of that system right there. It's a pretty darn powerful thing. And yes, we are growing into new capabilities, but it probably exceeds the classification of this discussion.
All right, so this kind of question of MARSOC and what some might say like is the value proposition of the force, for SOCOM, but also for the larger Marine Corps. Talk a bit about how you're kind of positioning the Raiders and the other Marines that are part of the community.
Yeah, I mean, just like any other part of the force, whether it's in the SOCOM world or in the broader joint service, we're beholden to the GFM or to the GSOS, in the force, the force allocation system. But from our perspective and what we think we bring into the table, we really try to focus in on priority areas, and we think we're best. In fact, we know we're best when we have MARSOC capability aggregated. And that's a relative term, so the aggregated can be in one region. Of course, we don't have one big formation. We're normally a relatively small, highly enabled C2 node with spokes, small, the small, disaggregated, small, again, highly enabled teams out doing things that are well above what you expect of a small group of people.
And does the regionalization approach of the battalions help with that?
It does, but I don't think we're locked into that. There's tons of stories out there or historical anecdotes from MARSOC where, we thought we're going one place, we ended up going another, like in mid-flight, and we were able to still do very well in those. In fact, we have a couple of those going on now. If you kind of go back and look at our participation on the fights against ISIS, particularly in northern Iraq. All those forces that went in or did that were not allocated to that mission. That's not the mission that they thought they were going on their workups. Mm-hmm. That was somewhat of a surprise to everybody. But they were still able to, frankly, perform exceedingly well. And the reason we do that is the way we produce the force. We focus on readiness and capabilities. The thought being there is that whatever we're called on to do, that we can make those adjustments easier because we're focused on executing the core tasks that are associated with SOF, and it allows us to basically make adjustments on the fly if we have to. Now, when we do have persistence in each one of the regions, sure, that's helpful. I don't see it as critical. I see it as kind of enhancing, because personal relationships get developed, familiarity with the theater. But the folks that we're sending to the Philippines, we could repurpose them to another mission right now, and they would do very well. I'm highly confident in that, and we have a pretty significant body of work to demonstrate that that is the case.
And so that flexibility for a theater commander, TSOC, or an embassy combatant commander, it kind of sounds like it comes down to mindset as much as actual the skills that go into building.
Right.
a Marine.
What we're trying to do is provide the best soft capability humanly possible to that TSOC commander. And I tell the TSOC commanders this, and I think we do a pretty good job at this. We've done, and over the years, not just during my time in command, but back from the first commander on, I think we've done a very good job of providing a fully worked up, fully certified, frankly hyper-enabled SOF entity that is very flexible to the TSOC commanders. And I like to think they would agree with me. But and again, we have a pretty good body of work at this point, moving into our 20th year, that shows that, whether it was our time in Western Afghanistan, Southern Afghanistan, Northern Iraq, or what we've been doing for years now in the Philippines, for years now in East Africa, and what we continue to do in the CENTCOM AO.
With SOCOM, having different options, by units, for the Raiders and naval special warfare being focused on maritime domain, just by kind of larger service. How do you sort of differentiate between, when you're articulating what the Raider force can do, by say what naval special warfare might do, in a given contingency?
Yeah. I would say, the first thing you got to recognize is kind of like looking at a Venn diagram, right? Like our sister components can do a lot of things that we can do, and we can do a lot of things they can do. But each one of the components have their particular strengths. I mean, obviously, that's to the casual observer. But I think where we excel and what we bring to the table, I think we do this very well, is that it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's being able to enable the joint force. We have all the skills to live, thrive, and survive for a persistent amount of time. There's inherent in that. We can do things that are normally associated with our Green Beret brothers, in terms of developing partnerships, establishing multi-generational relationships. That you can't underestimate the value of that. But also, as we move in the crisis and conflict, our ability to facilitate those joint fires and maneuver that we talked about earlier. I think we kind of came out of the box like that from when we were first established, just because the way we integrate ops and intel, and we can disaggregate it, so we can cut that level of capability all the way down to the team level, or we could aggregate it and bring it up to a higher level of command. I think we do that better, and everything that comes along with that. I think that is key to our contribution.
That this is kind of riffing on what you're talking about, that ability to move from the different, phases isn't quite the right word, but going from kind of competition to outright conflict. As you said earlier, that may happen like an avalanche instantaneously, or it may be slow boil. How do you kind of think about approaching that liminal phase in between? It's something that's not quite classic competition, something that's not quite the way most people would imagine a high intensity conflict.
Yeah.
What makes the Raider kind of vision for that unique in SOCOM?
And I think our approach, and if you look at it as a continuum, those actions that you're doing in the competition phase, you need to be doing those in a way, and I think we do this well, that if you do get to what I'll call crisis, is it looks like you're going to conflict, that you're able to provide the combatant commander, national leaders, etc., flexible options, either to deter or to convince that this is a bad idea. And God forbid if it does go into conflict, that you've given as much advantage to those higher level commanders, to those higher level decision makers as possible?
You know, the aspect of deterrence around signaling is what I was thinking about, the idea of, you know, how much an adversary needs to know that they can be held at risk versus surprise.
Yeah.
You know, in the Indo-PACOM, because of what, you know, China has in terms of economic and political wiring of much of the region, what, you know, MARSOC kind of brings to that environment where there's a lot of surveillance, there's a lot of awareness. How do you kind of approach that uniquely, right, that gives a bit of that advantage and a kind of optionality?
Yeah, it's going to
Can't go there?
It's going in classification pretty quick.
All right.
But we do have, I don't know how we would word it, but yeah, we have significant, I think we have significant and rapidly increasing capabilities to illuminate any operating environment.
Sure.
Through the continuum of crisis, through competition, crisis, and the conflict.
Yeah.
So we're not just all about you know, holding targets in custody for joint fires, but we also can illuminate how those in competition may be competing against us. And also too, and that doesn't only support the combatant commander, that supports the country team and their country plan,
right,
and the things that they're trying to do to put our country at more of an advantage and hopefully to avoid conflict.
And that kind of almost whole government approach is sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's getting a little bit out of my lane, but what I do know, and we have done it, and we are currently doing it, is we are providing, I'll call it illumination of the environment that is very helpful, and it has led to action by the country teams in the countries where we operate.
Yeah.
We're very proud of that actually, because again, that's just the inherent flexibility in the force, where, you know, we're not strictly on kinetics. The capabilities we have are relevant through the competition, crisis, conflict paradigm.
You know, the comment you made earlier about how much a radar officer has to plan and think about operationally, right? It's a larger and larger cognitive load, you know, more of a, you know, complex logistics environment. Talk about kind of how you're taking a systems type approach to those kinds of challenges where, you know, we all can only handle so much information in a day, but yet we also need to learn faster and more quickly.
Right. You're catching me in the middle of this project, actually. So step one is to create time in the training continuum that we can then cut out and have these type of events.
So like trade space with something else, or?
Yeah, you're always going to have to make hard decisions because you have a finite amount of time and you have an increasing amount of tasks. It's just like everybody else does. You have to prioritize your time so that your training time is put to max use. And then after that, of course, you got to organize and make sure you're training right using that time that you've created. So the analogy I like to use is when I was a young officer, I learned a heck of a lot by being a FIST team leader or a fire support coordinator, running up and down the Mojave Desert out there in 29 Palms. Because what the training used to do out there is that you get increasingly complex fire support problems to the point where you're probably not going to see that level of complexity, but you're running multiple suppression, marking, fire for effects, et cetera, using multiple firing agencies. And it really becomes a stress X and and really a very complex training environment. But what you get out of that is you get a deeper understanding of, one, all the various agencies that are supporting you, whether it's in the find or whether it's in the strike, and then how to organize those. And then you get the sets and reps, right? So you're not having that first set and rep when you're in the real world. Here at MARSOC, what we're moving towards is how do we replicate that in the modern operating environment? Now, we've been lucky enough, we just recently opened up our battle skills trainer, which is frankly, it's a sim center that's going to allow us to get after a lot of that in the simulation world, and we got some pretty good simulators here. However, that's really just going to be to support when we can get guys out and get actual sets and reps. There's no way in a live environment we're going to be able to replicate that. So again, having the battle skills trainer and our sim center come online now, that's going to allow us to put those young officers in there and frankly put them through the ringer the way that I was put through the ringer by the staff out there at 29 Palms on multiple occasions, and I think that's what it's going to take.
And it sounds like, too, the learning that's going on deployment cycles back quite quickly, that information, that insight, and so that maybe there's that trading of the classical training environment with let's bring operational knowledge.
Right. I mean, one thing that the current operating environment, we're frankly in a competition phase. There's some exceptions to that in Iraq right now. ISIS is still out there, and we're still getting after them. But what we're not getting out there is full-scale conflict. So the officers are getting a lot of good sets and reps right now. They're getting a lot of good awareness and understanding of the operating environment, particularly in the competition phase. But to be prepared for the high-end conflict, we got to get those sets and reps in. So that's got to be done on the training side. And again, like I said, we're at the point right now where we're creating the space, we're identifying the trade-offs, and we're putting the mechanisms, the systems, the simulation, et cetera, in place to give these folks the sets and reps. And frankly, on our staff NCO side, they're actually a little bit ahead. If you look at our team leaders course, that's a lot closer to where I want the officers course to be, where if you go out and you see how we're preparing our incoming team leaders, you don't get to just rock up and be an MSOT team chief. You go through we have a course for this. And then what those guys are getting, they're getting really good sets and reps, everything from the planning to the execution to the rinse and repeat actions. So we have a lot of work to do. I think we have a pretty good plan, but the proof will be in the pudding here.
The cognitive dimension, to all this is front and center, obviously. You talked earlier about the importance of reading some of the history, of the Pacific. The Army has the Harding Project currently, which has been pushing professional military writing. Talk a bit about that intersection of how we, should expect, modern militaries to share information, ideas, outside of official channels, whether it's, again, essays, in publications that are online or traditional military journals.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about the history, and absolutely, you got to be well rooted in the history, whether it's through your formal schooling or, frankly, if you're a professional, you need to be reading constantly, right? You need to be absorbing information. You need to create in yourself that curious, inquisitive mind. So whether you're studying, how the naval and land and the air battle in and around Guadalcanal went down, or how the Navy shifted from that battle to Midway, reading that history, but really also too, you got to be inquisitive enough to know, hey, I need to dig into what happened in the conflict recently between Azerbaijan and Armenia. How did the Israelis approach the problem in southern Lebanon in their last few excursions there? How did the Gaza thing go down? The Houthis, what are they all about? How are they doing operations? Why are they able to have effects? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff out right now about the Ukraine-Russian conflict, and there certainly is a lot to learn there. But again, like I talked about earlier, hey, what are those narco groups in South America? What are they capable? How do they get that capable? And then that way you'll have the understanding not only from the past, but where we're at now, and then at least what I've taken, you start getting a better feel for where are we going in terms of the capabilities needed on the operational side down to the tactical and how those two relate to one another. Mm-hmm. So I guess it all comes down to what our leaders have been telling us for years: is you got to read, and you got to have an inquisitive mind. That's inherent to being a professional.
The lessons learned that you're talking about from, say, Ukraine, a lot of that is coming through, writing and analysis from Ukrainians, from military observers in the West. There's a huge repository now of insights, and it's prompting big questions, that the Marine Corps has been thinking about, future of tanks, for example. What are some of the lessons you're kind of taking from what you're reading in an unclassified sense from Ukraine and its implications for SOF?
Yeah, the biggest one, and this goes back to what keeps me up at night, is that obviously it's you're seeing a lot of the, it's frankly World War I trench warfare. You're seeing people slug it out with direct fire type of engagements, but the things that they're doing to get after one another, it's like, holy cow. But here's the important part. If you really dig into it and you look at how fast the cat and mouse game of move, counter move is happening in terms of capabilities. There's been a lot of writing about the the UAS battle that's going on there, but it's happening across all fronts there. But to watch that cat and mouse game and watch the cycle of move, counter move, get tighter and tighter and faster. In fact, it's that example that's why I'm, you asked me what keeps me awake at night, but what I'm thinking about is, okay, we got a good plan, we're modernizing, we have a good azimuth going forward, we think pretty good, we know what we're doing. Speed, the tempo of our upgrades, the tempo of our modernization, the tempo of laying in the training to facilitate the capabilities development. That is the challenge. That's going to be the hardest part of all of this.
What dials do you have to turn, or how does the throttle move, on that from a commander's perspective when you're in, a SOF organization trying to, it's already fast moving.
Yep.
How do you speed it up more?
The biggest thing we can do from our side of the house is be well organized. So, as I said, I think one of the things we do well is how we produce the force. We have a very disciplined, frankly, sacrosanct way that we do systems approach. It goes all the way back from what you learned as a lieutenant, right? We used to have in the Marine Corps these little red books that said systems approach to training, and it's just as relevant today as it's ever been. But the point being is you have to be organized, because through that organization you're going to get efficiency, and that's going to get you to maximize your time. Yeah. Okay, there's nothing worse than flailing around on something. And it kind of goes back, speaking of reading, I also recommend you go out and you read about the great coaches, right? And I'd recommend anybody to start with, and there's a bunch of books written on John Wooten and his, I'll call it his systems approach to training. Yeah. And if you look at all the great coaches, Joe Gibbs, Belichick, who's now a North Carolina guy, so we'll take him, we'll claim him. But same thing with Joe Gibbs or any of them, right? Nick Saban, et cetera, is that if you read Wooten first, it's all the same. And what it is, it's a very well organized, very disciplined approach to producing, in our case, the force, and their coach, the team. And you see how over time that they've gotten better and better, and they've been able to not only achieve excellence, but sustain excellence. So back to what you were saying before, the same thing applies to us being able to move fast, or as fast as we can. The conversations we're having now, and the next kind of move, and we're kind of in the process of doing this, is in our force development and our capabilities development, we have to have the same systematic approach to that. So as we develop the force, we develop the capabilities, we're both moving together, okay? And again, squeezing that very valuable time that we have to make the most out of it. Our guys here are super, but they're not necessarily superhuman. They're a little bit older here at MARSOC. We don't do street to fleet here. So a lot of our guys have families, right? And the old saying, if you don't understand family readiness, you don't understand operation, and that's true. So you only have so much time, and we do push pretty hard, but we can't go 24/7.
Yeah. The dimension that, and this is a bit some of that value proposition perspective on, MARSOC is, a Raider becomes a Raider after having served in the Marine Force, right? That's totally different than, as you said, being an 18 X-ray and Army Special Forces, et cetera. Talk about some of that differentiation, because there's probably Marines listening who are thinking about that, and how that sets them up for a soft career, vice, being, again, going into straight to naval, boot camp, then on to special warfare training.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. It is a huge advantage for us. Now, our problem set's a little bit different. We like to complain about being so small, but there's a lot of strength in that. So one of the strengths are that we can maintain a system where we're pulling from the fleet versus pulling from the street. So what we get is we get somebody that's not only been through the Marine Corps boot camp, all right, and they've gotten that stamp on them, but they've also gotten a little bit of experience, and they've been in the fleet. So they have some, as we like to say in the Marine Corps, they have some salt on them, right? Yeah. And it's not just that they've been around for a couple extra years, but they've been on a deployment. They've been through workups. They've been out to 29 FOMs. They've been to MWX. They have experience. They've seen good leaders, and they've seen leaders that aren't as good. So they know what right looks like. And then going from whatever part of the Marine Corps you're coming to us from, and to be in this part of the Marine Corps, that's a conscious decision. So, by the time somebody gets over here, gets through our ANS and gets through our training pipeline, they really want to be here. So allows us to leverage, frankly, the best of the Marine Corps and then bring them in here. We're able to facilitate getting them to the next level with a lot of the soft advantages we have, and that makes for a great force.
You know, this dimension of speed, you know, you talked about in not just warfare, but technology, you know, the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, you know, I think exemplifies that, particularly with robotic systems, you know, drones in the air, particularly a little bit on the ground, a little bit of, you know, kind of nascent AI. What's your kind of read on the value of robotics and AI in SOF right now and the role it might play and how you're looking at the force from today onward?
Yeah, I think it's just our reality now.
Yeah.
So there's a period of time where I was kind of like skeptical on it. I don't know, it was probably just...
What prompted that skepticism?
You know, I'm old, it's new, it's technology, but there's such a body of work out there right now. You know, we keep talking about the Azerbaijan and Armenia piece. That's the first time I had the aha moment where I saw, I think it was the Azerbaijans, they were taking out, like at the tactical level, they were taking out C2 nodes via unmanned systems. And it looked like it'd just be a commercial drone type of thing.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow, man, here we go. And then, of course, the experience I saw in SOC South in South America with the Clan of Golfo. And, of course, even just a casual observation of what's going on in Ukraine right now is, it's like, okay, this stuff's here. Okay, so that's at the tactical edge.
Yeah.
And then you think about, okay, what are the denial capabilities that Division 1A opponents have? Now they're pretty significant. So your ability to maneuver as a human being is probably a little more limited. And then, so you're thinking, hey, there's other ways that you're still going to have to sense, the way that you're still have to have effects. Considering where technology is right now and where we're going, both in commercial and on the military side in terms of unmanned systems, it's pretty obvious that it's here for the foreseeable future. And it's absolute capability that you're going to have layered in, whether it's to defend yourself or whether it's to be able to sense the enemy. And
that's manifesting, and again, back to the systems approach and robotics training, you know, modules.
Yeah, this is a great example. So, you know, we have a pretty healthy effort here on the unmanned systems. We've already got it layered in. We have card-carrying UAS Marines that are SOCs that are in the force. We have some pretty good capabilities right now. We're working very hard to layer in kind of the next level of capabilities. So our folks over in CDI are moving out with the capability. Now, okay, how do we blend this into the force?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've already gone through kind of one iteration as we've created another special operations capable specialist in the form of what we call SOC-Us, which are, no kidding, card-carrying Marines that are coming out of the UAS community. We're getting them schooled up on our systems, getting them kind of basically soft capable, and then integrating them into the force. Okay, now we're gonna have to figure out with the proliferation of all this stuff, okay, what about the operators? What do they need to know? How do we train the officers? How do we train the team chiefs to be able to employ these things properly? Just like, how do you use 60 millimeter mortars to suppress a target while you dial up fire for effect with an 81 millimeter mortar, right? All those sets and reps, how do we build those into the system, both from initial training all the way through our continuation training?
I mean, it's interesting to see that transformation, the larger Marine Corps with the semi-autonomous, trucks basically as missile platforms for, striking targets like ships. That it seems like there are parallel movements underway, both tactical but even beyond.
Oh yeah.
That seems like a really major transformation.
Yeah, I mean, I have pretty good view on what the Marine Corps is doing, and they got some great stuff going on this front. Same problem set, no different. Dave Odom, across the river, 2nd Marine Division, good friend of mine. He was over here last week. We were having some kind of deep, involved conversations on this type of stuff. Same problem sets, and again, inside force, soft, subs, Marines.
Yeah.
So we're in the same problem set.
The the role too now of AI for analytics and being able to process massive amounts of information is transforming everything from, the way high schoolers are doing their homework to, large Fortune 100 companies. Is that something that you're pushing the pedal on, or do you kind of see that we're skiing over our tips a little bit on some of that?
Yeah, well, one, you must be reading my diary, because we're doing a poor man's version of it now. But we know that the future, everybody knows this, we know the future is going to be the automation of the analytical process, right? That's your whole speed on your OODA loop, if you will. So until that comes into play, and we will not have the capability to develop that here. We will be able to harness that and pull it in for our own purposes. In the meantime, what you look for is how do you expand your analytical horsepower, right? So we're pretty good right now the way we're set up. Okay, we're not perfect, but what we're able to do is we have the highest classification systems, and the way we're organized, the way we're equipped, the way we're trained, we can push that down to the tactical edge. And the way we build our force, remember what I was talking about with the special operations, we can push analytical horsepower down to the tactical edge. But more importantly, with the comm systems we have in place that are inherent to our force, we also give a capability to not only collect data at the edge, but able to push it back for analytical purposes and or leverage other people's collection and analytical efforts back down to the tactical edge. In other words, we can push and pull information, which is very powerful, which has allowed us to do things at a pretty good rate, at a pretty small level. When you kind of get up to the next level, we're pretty adept at leveraging other people's stuff. In other words, how do we basically federate out the analytical process, right? So do we have partners up at Fort Meade? Do we have partners back at, I've used before, it's like the Oklahoma National Guard has a great capability.
Yeah.
If you can tie into them, you can get them to do stuff, etc. And our intel leaders, particularly the company grade and field grade officers that are normally out there running these type of things, that they do a pretty good job of that. But that's going to be insufficient for the future and for the speed we're going to have to operate at. So we're going to have to figure out, as the automation of the analytical process comes online, how to leverage that for our purposes.
I think with time, I'll ask a couple more questions. Just one on modern day marine, and then on Soft Week, just kind of what you're hoping to get out of that and share. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Start with modern day marine.
Well, modern day marine, I've never been to a modern day marine, but we'll be going this year for sure. And MARSOC traditionally participates in that. Again, it's just an opportunity to continue the message, to continue the conversation, that we're all in this together. Our friends at NSW, our friends at USASOC, ourselves here, our friends at AFSOC, there's a lot to be gained by getting a close relationship with the operating concepts that our services are running.
And then for like say Soft Week, you have there both the international, allied components along with the U.S. What's that narrative going to be like?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because I'm wearing a different hat this year. So as a TSOC commander, Soft Week was an operational act for us, because what we were able to do at that event is not only does all the industry come in, but we bring all of our partners. Yeah. So we were able to bring all of our partners in, and get them into the seminars, get them in to speak with senior leaders within not only the SOF enterprise, but other parts of the U.S. government. So in terms of building those relationships, it was super helpful. For this one, as a component commander, and my primary job being man, train, and equip, it's okay, what are we missing? What is there that we don't understand? What is it that we're not tracking on? So when they kind of bring in not only all of U.S. SOF, but a significant amount of international SOF, but also all the industry that supports that, it kind of creates an environment where, hey, if you have a hole in your swing, you're probably gonna have a conversation down there with somebody that's gonna help you understand that, or at least illuminate that for you. That, and it's a great opportunity to see some old friends.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, Major General Huntley, thanks again for taking part in this conversation today. We've covered MARSOC's unique capabilities, the force modernization, the value of reading and writing in professional military education and the force, how raiders are preparing for future threats. And thank you for sharing your insights on leading this elite force. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us, and keep this conversation going at Modern Day Marine and Soft Week. I'm August Cole with Useful Fiction. We'll see you next time.